Now, welcome to our second edition of Marvel Cinematic Rankings, and thank you to Mr. Star Wars for the name suggestion that, as far as I saw, got the most votes or likes or thumbs up, so I decided to go with it. Anyway, this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for The Incredible Hulk, seeing how it stacks up in the rankings next to the one other movie we've done thus far, before I then read and respond to some of your comments. Alright, and let's right away get to the results of the poll, where we'll see that only 2% of voters thought this was a 5-star film, 13% then gave it 4 stars, 50% of voters said it was a 3-star film and thought it was about average, which then left us with 26% of people to give it 2 stars, saying it's not very good, and then a final 8% to give it only 1 star, saying it was terrible. And so when we do all the math here, The Incredible Hulk ends up with an average score of 2.75 stars, which puts it into, well, second or last place overall, and well behind the first Iron Man movie. And it'll be interesting to see how long it stays here at the bottom, or if maybe it never does escape the cellar. We'll have to wait and see, but something tells me it won't be moving from the bottom anytime soon. And to begin to understand why this is rated so low, let's get to the comments, but not before quickly once again saying thank you to everyone who does indeed vote, comment, and watches the videos. It is all greatly appreciated. And now on to the top rated comment, which this time came to us from Captain DC, who said, "The Hulk side of Marvel lore has been mostly forgotten." And though I don't normally dig into the responses to the initial comments, in this case I think AJ Ania had a really good, albeit unfortunate point, which is that since Universal Studios has the distribution rights to the Hulk, that means he's kind of been pushed to the side in the MCU, at least as far as his portion of Marvel lore goes anyway. Even though, yes, Hulk himself has been in several movies at this point, which is thanks to a stipulation in the contract that says Marvel can freely use him in team-up movies, which is such an odd stipulation when you really think about it. But anyway, that's why we've yet to see another Hulk solo movie, why we never get anything like Planet Hulk or World War Hulk or anything along those lines, but have seen him in all the Avengers films as well as Ragnarok. Alright, and going along with all this, we have a comment here from Francisco Javier who said, "The movie doesn't feel like a cohesive installment in the MCU, mostly because of things that weren't explored again, such as Stern's or Betty's fate, characters I even had to look up because I barely remember, and the actor's switch also plays a role. The most, oh right, this is the MCU scene the movie offers is when Tony Stark appears in the end. Other than that, it feels like a movie that almost doesn't happen." Then there's also this comment from Daniel Griffin who says, "It was decent, though I did like Norton as Banner, and the opening part in Brazil was fun, though my question is, what happened to Betty?" Also, we have this comment from I'm the Reverse who said, "It's there. It feels disconnected from the rest of the MCU. It has a different tone, different actors, less MCU humor. Besides that, it's fine. Nothing great, nothing bad. I am excited for Abomination to be brought back in She-Hulk, though. It'll make the film feel more connected." And I totally agree that this movie feels like, by far, the most disconnected film from the rest of the MCU. I've even had people I know ask me if it's considered part of the MCU canon, because it doesn't have that same flow into the other films, or it lacks a direct connection. Though I do think we have to keep in mind it's only the second film in the MCU, and they were still getting their footing. Plus, though I'm not overly familiar with all the details, and going back to what I was talking about before, Universal does have the distribution rights to the Hulk, and had a say in this film. And I think the biggest reason why so many forget about this film, or that yes, it is part of the MCU canon, is that, first and foremost, it's the changing of actors playing Bruce Banner, going from Edward Norton in this one to Mark Ruffalo in all the other ones to come, and that characters like Betty, the leader, Abomination, and so on are never seen from or heard from again, though, as pointed out, Abomination will be in the upcoming She-Hulk series. And really the only time there's any sort of callback or connection to this film is Banner's line in Avengers when he says, "That's my secret, Captain, I'm always angry," and then he turns into the Hulk. That, of course, ties into the very end of this movie where we see Banner is now learning to, or trying to learn to, control the Hulk, or control turning into him. But other than that, if you don't see this movie, you're honestly not missing anything in relation to the rest of the MCU. It's not even really a backstory or origin story for the Hulk. It just is what it is. Okay, and next up here we have a comment from Roberto Soles, who said, "I liked Norton's Hulk more than Ruffalo's version, to be honest." Then this comment from the Batman, who said, "It showed a side of Hulk we don't get to see anymore now that he's turned into a walking meme." Also then this comment from the Moxinator 5555, who said, "People definitely sleep on it way too much and put it at the bottom of the rankings for no real good reason. Also, am I the only one who thinks Norton was a way better choice than Ruffalo?" There's also then this comment from Jared Last Name, who said, "I've never understood why this is considered such a weak link in the MCU. It's surprisingly grounded while still having plenty of superhero excitement. I've always found Edward Norton's darker and more reserved take on Bruce to be a bit more enjoyable than Mark Ruffalo's, and the first scene with the Hulk in the factory is absolutely wonderful. Not the best, but far from the worst if you ask me." Next up then this comment from Sim and Tilly, who said, "I've recently watched all MCU films again, start to finish, and have to say, The Incredible Hulk is an oddity among them, but I really have to praise Edward Norton. Would have loved to have seen what he does with the character in Avengers because he gave a very good performance. I also think the film aged better than, say, Iron Man 2 or Thor 2. And though some will certainly disagree with me, which is fine, I think Norton does a really good job of playing Bruce Banner in this film. And in a lot of ways, I like what he brings to the character more than what Ruffalo brings to it, which is not to say I hate or even dislike his version of Banner. I just think there's something about the way Norton portrays Banner with more confidence or wisdom, you could say, that I think is better or more befitting the character. I don't know, Ruffalo just brings this shy, awkward, scared timidness to the character that makes him feel like he's not a real, true rival or match for the Hulk, if that makes sense. And along with this, Ruffalo also gives off more of the dumb, absent-minded genius vibe, whereas Norton was the smarter or, again, wiser genius type, the guy who knew how to take care of his business or handle himself in nearly any given situation. I mean, I can absolutely see and buy that Norton managed to blend in and survive down in Brazil, that he was down there working and wasn't afraid to stand up and be assertive and so on, as seen in The Incredible Hulk. But I couldn't see Ruffalo's Banner doing that same thing. I just think they almost made him too mentally weak in a way. Though yes, I fully get the constant fear of turning into the Hulk looming over you would mess with your mind quite a bit. Furthermore here, for better or worse, I could never see Edward Norton's Banner fitting into a film like Thor Ragnarok that's kind of more humorous than anything else we've seen in the MCU. He just brought a whole other and very serious tone to the character that wouldn't work there at all, I think. And I'm curious how he would have worked in Avengers or all the other Avengers movies because, again, there's just a completely different feel to the two of them. They don't feel like the same character even to me, which, again, is why I understand why some feel The Incredible Hulk doesn't fit in with the rest of the MCU, because it's not really the same Bruce Banner, or maybe it's just that the whole approach to him is completely different, which is why it feels, again, so disjointed or separate from the rest of the MCU. Alright, and moving on now, we have this comment from King Doom Gaming, who said, "I personally really like the film. I don't see why it gets so much backlash." Then also this comment from Christian Thompson, who said, "It's a film that gets outclassed by so many others in the MCU, but I still found it enjoyable enough when doing an MCU watch through. Obviously one of the weakest, but still not awful." We also have this comment from Keiko, who said, "I get why it's overlooked, but it's a pretty decent film. I really like the way it's structured with 3 Hulk action scenes that all feel really different from each other and properly built up to." Then we have this comment from Jack Sawyer, who said, "I definitely give The Incredible Hulk a 4 out of 5. Even if it's one of the weaker MCU films, the vast majority of them are so brilliant that even most of the ones that don't stack up as well are very good movies and are better than most of the garbage out there." That's what's so great about the MCU, and at the time of its release, before it was one-upped by so many other entries, The Incredible Hulk was truly stellar. I still enjoy watching it when I do a binge of the whole series. And personally here, I remember enjoying The Incredible Hulk quite a bit when it first came out. I don't think it was a perfect movie or the greatest film ever. As many pointed out, you could certainly say it has some pacing issues and other problems. But I thought it was fine, and I still think it's fine at the least. And though funny enough, I don't get to vote in my own polls, but if I could, I'd probably want to give it 3.5 stars, which of course isn't an option. And I'm really not sure if I'd go 3 stars or 4 stars when it boiled right down to it. And I really do wonder if it's so maligned today because though it's good or somewhere around or slightly above average overall, I think It just doesn't stack up to some of the other movies in the MCU, as people were pointing out in the comments. Plus, again, there's that disconnect we were talking about before. And I certainly think we could argue that says more about the greatness of the MCU than it does about how quote-unquote bad The Incredible Hulk was. I don't know, people are certainly entitled to their opinions either way, either negative or positive. It's all good in my book as long as you're being fair and honest. And again, it's not the best superhero movie ever, and certainly not anywhere close to the best movie in the MCU, but I don't think it's as bad as some make it out to be. I do think that if it were a standalone film and if the MCU wasn't a thing, more people wouldn't be as harsh towards it. But when putting it in the context of the MCU, no, it doesn't hold up extremely well there, which again, I think says more about the MCU than it does about Hulk. Alright, and our next comment then comes to us from Dan Zoid, who said, I'm going to go with 4 stars even just for the fact that they treated the character seriously, an idea that seems to have completely vanished. And I have to agree that this film took a much more serious approach to Hulk than any subsequent film would, which I think also ties into how the early days of the MCU felt much more grounded in reality than they do now, which I've talked about quite a bit, about how they have gradually fully embraced the comic book aspect of all things, to the point where this feels like a comic book universe brought to live action now, whereas at first when it came to the MCU, it was like they were plucking ideas from the pages of comic books and then placing them in a real world setting, and they made it fit that way around, if that makes sense. And as also said before, that gradual shift has been done very, very impressively. Alright, and now let's get to just a few final comments before wrapping this up. Starting with this one from Ace Mowick, who said, people can moan about Ang Lee's Hulk movie, but at least it tries being more stylistic and delves more into the psychological element of the character that Peter David explored in the comics. Then there's this one from RP Visual, who said, by far one of the most unique movies in the MCU, does not deserve any of the backlash at all. Also had this one from Shadow Jinkus, who said, it's not the greatest film, but it's overhated. Then there was what Slicer Neons had to say, which is, I sure wish we got more Liv Tyler as Betty, lovely actress. We also have this comment from Big Blue, who said, fun fact, this movie inspired Skillet to write Monster, which I promise you've heard of. Look it up right now. If you can't bring it to mind, you're already on YouTube. Imagine a montage of Ruffalo's Hulk being played to that song. It doesn't work at all. At least for me, that's the testament to how they did Hulk right in this film, that it completely fits with a metal song playing in the background. That's what Hulk feels like to me. And finally, we have this comment from Jay Makowski, who said, there's 3 times Bruce turns into Hulk in this film. 1, he has no idea what's going on, and that's when he views it as a sickness of some sort. 2, when he fights military forces, he has some awareness of his abilities, but not enough. He still fears it. 3, in the climax, he embraces who he is and realizes that turning into the Hulk is the only way to save people. And throughout the MCU, we see Bruce struggle with the monster inside of him. This incredible arc he goes through wouldn't happen without this film. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of The Incredible Hulk, or what I or anyone else had to say about it here in this video. You can also feel free to go and vote or comment in the Iron Man 2 poll, which should be up now if you're watching this. Either way, do leave a comment below or somewhere, and let's talk some Marvel. And until next time, thanks for watching.